Thanks. It's fun to be here in this capacity. I was telling somebody this morning, I buy books on conflict like other women buy shoes. So I brought some of my resources on the back table back there. So if any of this stuff spurs an interest and you want to just take a look at the book, feel free to do that. Okay, just wanted to start out by showing you my family. My husband Forrest and our 25-year-old daughter Sarah. We play around together a lot, and we're pretty goofy when we're together. But and she's also a coach. I'll show you this is kind of a story of our home. So kid passes to McFarland. She takes it down the court. Look at her move. She tries to shoot, but O'Neill is blocking. And her daughter says, "How much longer do I have to do this?" So it actually, I do love basketball. I didn't put that in my bio, but the first section I look at in the newspaper every morning is a sports section, because I'm looking for women's basketball. Very little of it on TV, but it is there, so I have to support my passion. So I just thought I'd share with you this. We're dealing with such a heavy topic when we talk about conflict. And so I like to look for evidences, like in music, how it's in there. Cartoons are rich in conflict. So, if you want to look at it and be able to laugh about it, take a look at cartoons. This is Baby Blues, My Day, laundry time, kid time, kitchen time, cleaning time, and me time is the tiny little wedge in there. And maybe that's how you feel this morning. I don't know. This one I thought is apropos for the Valentine's Day dance coming up. Let's see if I can read it. 4 things men do with their daughters, but not with their wives. First one, dance. Hee hee, this is fun. And the mom's going, oof, sigh. Second one is shop. He says, Zoe wants to go to the mall and show me something. We'll be back in a couple of hours. And she goes, huh? Third one is talk. So let me tell you about my day at the office, he says. And she's going, And then the last one, listen. Now tell me about your day. So, this is kind of what we're dealing with sometimes. And just a few others. I'll go through these quickly. Peanuts, classic on conflict. What would you do if I pushed your snowman over? Nothing. What could I do? You're bigger and stronger than I am. You're older and can run faster. I really couldn't do anything to stop you. I realize full well that I am at your mercy when things of this sort are concerned. All I can do is simply hope that you will choose not to do so. She walks away, and he says, little by little, I'm becoming an expert in the soft answer. This one I love, actually. I've been doing a little thinking. And I feel that as long as we have to live together in the same family, we should try to get along. I just think we could work a little harder at it, that's all. Do you agree? So he walks inside and says to Lucy, and I feel that as long as we have to live together in the same family, we should try to get along. I just think we could work a little harder at it all. Do you agree? Walks out and he says, you're right, talking to Lucy's like talking to a brick wall. Okay, we are doing more than cartoons, but this one I love. So Zitz is one of my favorite cartoons. Maybe if you don't have a teenage boy, you don't relate to it yet, but you will. So Jeremy, he says, I'm probably getting yelled at for the cell phone bill. He says, most likely the text messaging charges. He's thinking, judging by the color of her face, this has something to do with money. Well, whatever it was, it looks like she got it out of her system. Life is easier when you write your own lyrics. Okay, so now we'll get into a little more of the meat of things. I have a lot of resources that I love when I've learned about conflict. Because when I was working at UCSB, I was dealing every day. Typically, everybody that would come to see me, there was some some issue, and sometimes pretty minor and sometimes the opposite of minor, like way over here. And so just, and I would do some sharing of resources in groups and things, but a lot of my work was one-on-one. And what I've found over time is it's a lot easier to talk to other people about their conflicts than, deal with our own. And I would say, in an interesting sort of twist, I entered this whole career path out of a background of completely avoiding conflict. I was the one that would do anything to try to keep the peace and all that, because I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the experience, skills. I didn't grow up in a family that, dealt in a healthy way with conflict, so I really didn't know how to do it. And so I'm sort of entering this not as an expert, but as a learner, and I'm still a learner. So I'd just like to share a little bit of a quote from a man named Ken Cloak. And this is a little long, but I think it sort of sums this up. Each of us experiences innumerable miscommunications and conflicts in the course of our lives that affect us deeply and daily. It is impossible to grow up in a family, live in a neighborhood, attend school, work at a job, have an intimate relationship, raise children, or actively participate in the world without experiencing frequent conflicts. Much of our childhood is spent in conflicts with our parents, as you kind of talked about at your tables, siblings and playmates who teach us the first and most difficult lessons of life. Our families continue to generate conflicts throughout our lives, and as we proceed through school, we learn hard lessons about rejection and compromise, how to succeed and fail in disputes with teachers and peers, about shame, rage, and fear. Our most intimate relationships are often embroiled in conflicts and either deepen or dissolve with them. We pay a heavy price for these conflicts. Yet many of these conflicts are either avoidable or completely unnecessary. Most arise from simple miscommunications, misunderstandings, and seemingly irrelevant differences, poor choice of language, and false expectation. And so I want to close with this, and it's kind of what's on the board here. Each and every conflict we experience in life contains two truths. The truth of impasse, that we're stuck in a problem for which we would like to escape, and the truth of transformation, that it's possible to become unstuck and move on to a higher order of conflict by an understanding of the deep level, what got us stuck in the first place. So, this makes it sound sort of simple, but it's actually very complicated, and so much has been written about this. But I'd like you this morning to have a little role play where you get to actually step into some conflict a little bit. So at each of your tables, your leader has a bag, and in that bag there are some oranges. So as I would like you to sort of divide yourselves, and you don't have to move, but just divide yourself at the table in groups of 3. And if you don't come out even for 3s, a group can have 2. That's fine. So if the mentors could pass out the oranges, they'll describe to you. As they're doing that, and as you kind of divide yourself, try to listen to what the instructions are about this. Okay, you got yourselves sort of in groups of 3? Okay. Okay, now you have to listen to what you're going to do, okay? Okay, you're going to role play a scenario. One of you will be the mom, and the other 2 will be twins that are in the 4th grade. They're in different classes. It's Thursday night at about 10 o'clock. And both of the twins just remembered that there's an assignment for class tomorrow. Both twins need an orange for the assignment, but found that their older brother had eaten all the extra oranges at home, so there's only 1 left. It's too late to go to the store. There are no oranges growing in your yard, and there's no time to get one in the morning. So I'd like you to take about 2 minutes and figure out in your groups of 3 how you're going to resolve this. Okay? Okay. Okay, I'm wondering if there's a few of you that played moms that could describe how your children handled this conflict. Anybody want to say this is what we did? Patty.
We decided that nobody gets the orange.
Okay.
That they both needed to, and except the mom who gets to eat it.
All right. Whew, that's creative. That's good. Okay.
The reasoning behind that was that they both forgot, and initially they thought, well, we'll flip a coin, then it's nobody's making the decision, it's random. And then we went, oh, but then only one of them really learned. So we decided, well, they both forgot, they both have to go without an orange.
Okay. Okay. It's called a lose-lose, right? But a win in terms of learning about remembering things. Yeah.
So we got to one, either they both don't get it, or you cut it in half, and either way they have to explain why they didn't.
Okay. Okay. Great. Cut it in half. Anybody else have a different one?
So we thought about cutting it in half, but she wanted the whole thing. So then we thought about rock, paper, scissors, and she won. So then we thought about how about you use it for your project and then bring it over to my classroom when you're done.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Our mom's going to send us all to school with 2 apples.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yeah.
Paint an apple orange.
Ah, okay, okay, okay. Well, these are great, and it just kind of shows you how, this is real life stuff, and we as moms are often in this position. Sometimes we'd want to come in and solve it for them, and sometimes it's up to them to sort of figure it out for themselves. This is actually a classic example in conflict. So if any of you have been trained in conflict management, you would have maybe heard this story. But in sort of real life, as they talked about why they needed this orange, what it was for, they found out that one sibling needed the juice and the other sibling needed the rind. So if they could get to the point of why do you need the orange, there could possibly be a solution that would be win-win, and maybe they could learn from it too, like the mom over here. So it just to kind of stimulate the question of, trying to get underneath what's going on in the middle of this and help us understand why something might be important. I'm going to talk a little bit now about some research that was done actually way back in the early 70s by two researchers, last name Thomas and Kilman, and they developed this conflict mode instrument to really help us understand our own styles of dealing with conflict in different situations. It's not like a personality test where, kind of this is the way you are, like some other things. This is very much situationally oriented. So maybe in one situation, like at home, you might tend to deal with conflict one way, and at work you might do something else, or in different situations, different things. Anyway, if you're really interested in this, we're not going to actually do it. It's a 30 statements, or actually 60, so two sets of 30 statements with two possible answers for each one. And the instrument actually helps you sort of see what areas are your strength and which areas do you tend to be weaker in, so that you could maybe make some different decisions how you deal with conflict. But we'll just talk about what they came up with. So they use, in describing the results of this, two axes. The one vertical one is assertiveness, which is really looking at the extent to which one attempts to satisfy one's own concerns, okay? The other axis going across the bottom is cooperativeness, which is the extent to which we look at other people's concerns. And we do both, so these really come together. And so they came up with actually 5 different sort of categories or ways of looking at how we might deal with conflict in different situations. And we'll talk a little bit about each one. The thing to think about in these is that in every one of these different, I'll call them styles, conflict styles, they're sometimes completely appropriate. Even if you look at that and go, oh, I'd never do that. Sometimes, that style might be the best to use in a situation. Sometimes we get real comfortable in certain styles, and maybe that's not the best thing to do, but we do it anyway. And that's where the challenge and the learning is. So the first one is what's described as high in the assertiveness area, high in the looking at my own needs, and they call that competing. Okay, kind of obvious what that might be. And can you give me any ideas or examples of when it might be appropriate to use like a competing style in a healthy way?
Applying for a job.
Applying for a job, okay.
Presidential debate.
Advocating for your health.
Yeah. Advocating for yourself, absolutely. So in general, emergencies, oftentimes require that. Your kid's running in the street, you're not gonna, try to negotiate with the driver coming down the street. You're gonna get your kid out of the street right away. So decisive action, sometimes it's often appropriate if the issue is kind of maybe trivial, or you're right and the relationship with the person you're dealing with is not that important to you. So you're going to go for your own stuff and you're not going to worry too much about it. Okay, we won't talk too much about all the times it's not appropriate. We'll try to focus on when it is appropriate. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is accommodating. So that's way out on the cooperativeness scale. So high cooperative, low assertive. Can you think of, any examples maybe of?
Stoplight, or stop sign,
Stop sign, okay.
like letting a person go.
Letting someone go, yeah, okay. Maybe you have a right to go, but you're letting the other person go first, okay? Other situations where accommodating might make a lot of sense?
When like a kid, maybe your kid wants to brush their teeth before they go to the bathroom, and you said go to the bathroom and then brush your teeth. Like in that scenario, it seems they're doing what you want them to do.
Right.
They want a different order.
Right, so it's not that important, maybe, the order and so you're willing to say it's not, what I want is not that important, what you want, we're gonna go with that, so yeah.
Well, I can think of a lot of
times when the husband comes home really, really tired. We're tired too, but we might have a little more energy at that point and accommodate. Let them have a little bit of a break first before they jump into the house.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just illustrate. I've actually been looking at listening to a lot of popular songs and thinking, what's the conflict style in this song? And some of them have things that, we might not necessarily think are the best, values. However, there's one interesting song Beyonce sings on, she says, I keep saying yes, 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 and the first time I said no, it's the story of that. So she's accommodating her husband's requests for things, and then the first time she says no, it was like I never said yes. So I think sometimes when that's our most comfortable style, and we feel like we're just yes people all the time, sometimes it can just take something to happen that everything blows, and we go way up to the competing end and hit them over the head, So, realizing that is accommodating my pattern, and if it is, are there times when I need to develop that muscle in love, and look at other needs. So let's move on. Next area is kind of obvious. It's low assertiveness and low cooperativeness. It's called avoiding. And the word avoid maybe has bad connotations, but can you think of an example of when avoiding would be the best thing to do or the most appropriate thing to do? I don't know.
Sometimes people need space to cool down or just to get to a place where they feel like themselves and can talk, and allowing for that time.
Okay, right. Just giving space, letting people process. Yeah.
Maybe your child has experienced something or is going through a stage or something where your margin's bigger because you acknowledge that that's a piece of the equation and not just, you shouldn't,
Yeah.
So maybe just letting some things be okay.
Go. Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes, in certain situations, I know my tendency as a mom is to step in and solve things or fix things or whatever. And sometimes, pulling back and letting those natural consequences bear out if they're not life-threatening and morally threatening, that it can actually be beneficial. Another time when avoiding when the issue is really trivial, where you don't, you're not invested that much in it, or the relationship is insignificant, and it's like, do I want to go to bat for this? No, not really. Not in this situation. But sometimes when you care both about yourself and the relationship you're in, and you avoid because of hurt or fear, that might not be the best time to avoid it. Jono talked about dangerous conversations on Sunday, and it feels like this fits right into that. There's times when maybe you've been avoiding for a long time, and maybe it's time to step out. Okay. Next one is, we had this example in the orange with cutting it down the middle. Okay, compromising. Compromising is when, you get some of what you want, the other person gets some of what they want. And can you think of an example when you compromise effectively, or when that makes sense for you?
We go out on a Saturday night, one gets to pick the restaurant and one gets to pick the movie.
There you go. Okay. A successful Saturday night. Okay, good. Anybody ever negotiated for a new car? Okay, sometimes you're coming in, with this is what I want to pay. They're coming in with this is what I'm going to charge. And there's a lot of the back and forth. And oftentimes you come up with something in the middle. Unless you're so sure, sometimes it works. I bought a car once and I was buying it on December 31st by myself. My husband wasn't with me. And it was like we wanted it, but we didn't have to have it. Okay, so we knew, whoops. Okay.
Wake up your computer first.
not happy. Anybody have any ideas? Cozy?
Is the computer on? Did it run out of batteries?
Oh, it might have, huh? Okay, well, maybe she can deal with that, but we'll just keep talking.
Plug right here.
Okay. Okay, so compromise. You each get what you want, and it's not totally satisfying, and it's not, to the other person, and not totally satisfying to you. Thank you, Cozy.
You were telling a story about buying a car.
Yeah, buying a car. And so I ended up, I went in with the amount that I was willing to pay. And I knew it was December 31st. They wanted to get that car off the lot, and I didn't have to have it. I could let it go. But anyway, it turned out that they accepted my offer, and the only compromise was they wanted me to put the $1,000 down payment in a check instead of on a credit card. I said, okay, I can do that. So maybe I was compromising a little bit, but I felt like I got what I wanted, and they were happy too. Okay, we'll talk about the next one, which is, if you remember the graph, it would be way up in the right-hand corner. So your high assertiveness and high cooperativeness. Anybody think of a name for what that might be called? There we go. Page down. Page down. Yeah, thank you. Perfect.
Consensus?
Okay.
It might take a second for it to.
Oh, okay, it's warming up. So while it's warming up, we can, yeah. I'll give you the answer. Collaboration, or collaborating. And collaborating it's an interesting, and it often takes more time and energy, but in certain situations, it can actually be very, very satisfying, because you feel like you're getting your needs met, the other person feels like they're getting their needs met, and it's what we might call a win-win situation. And there are a lot of situations where collaborating can be great, where the relationship is really important and the issues are important. And you need both. If you're, I can think of an example in my life where this played out. We had 2 miscarriages, and my husband was like, no, we're not trying again. This is way too painful. And here I am with my biological clock, I was probably by then 37, 36, and it's ticking, and every time we talked about it, it felt like we got further apart. And finally, to make a long story short, we went to therapy over that issue, and one day, literally one day in therapy, we went from he didn't want to try to let's try, like right now, Yeah, it was great, but then I found out I couldn't get pregnant and, dealt with infertility and all that. So, but, in the end, because we worked through it and got some help to work through it, we came up with a solution that really worked for him and for us. And because of that, we had, let's see. Cozy, this is working on the computer, but it's not communicating with what's on the screen. I'm not sure why. Okay.
Restart the.
Yeah, I'm gonna just.
Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now is just, those are kind of the basic things to think about. And sometimes as you're in the middle of a situation, it's just interesting to think, what am I doing right now? Am I feeling satisfied about this? Is there a rub that just things don't feel quite right? And is there something that I could try differently? Am I aware of the other person's needs, my needs? Where does all this fit? So this is more a challenge in as we get to know ourselves and our own styles and how to deal with things, it can be a tool to think about.
What one do you want?
Next one.
Next one?
Yeah.
This one?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some what I call secret or not so secret ingredients in dealing with conflict. I was going to call them secret weapons, and then I thought, no. These aren't weapons. These are ideas or tools to help us. And these aren't like, it's not like some kind of magic answer, but just to remind us of some things that can help us as we're dealing with in conflict. The first area is just remembering to ask questions. And I know, like, it's kind of easy when I'm dealing with somebody else's issues to encourage them to do that. When I'm in my own issues, you know, I'm not reaching out there asking Forrest where he's at. Pretty much, you know, I'm trying to hold my own, you know. So I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but it's interesting that this whole challenge of asking questions, it's what I call kind of getting to the why, like we did with the orange. And it isn't the 2-year-old why, you know, where they say, why, you know, like, and you're having to, like, come up with that answer. But it's looking at what is going on? What are some of the things that are going on that are causing this kind of, you know, stress or whatever is happening? I brought some of my own resources on the back table, and one of them, there's 2 books with a similar title, Getting to Yes and Getting to Yes, like an additional Getting to Yes book, which has been written to trying to get to yes for what's going on inside of my own head, not just what's going on with the other person, but to know myself and what are the issues that I'm dealing with, to know my own why. Why is this bothering me? Why is this an issue for me? Just the curiosity. I mean, that's something that when we're in the middle of a stressful situation, I think oftentimes our curiosity goes kind of low. You know, we're sort of in survival mode and we're not interested in what's going on with the other person, especially if we're feeling attacked. But it's a way of sort of navigating this. And I've given you, later on I'll give you handouts that actually have some things that are helpful as different kinds of questions that you can ask to get to different things. Listening, I think, is probably the biggest. If I could only talk about one thing today, I think I would talk about listening, because, you know, there's courses in college on public speaking and speech, but how many courses have you ever seen on listening? You know, they're not really out there. And it's sort of something that we're sort of expected to do and know how to do, but as we model effective listening, we're teaching our children how to do that. And to me, you know, having kids grow up with skills that are beneficial in dealing with conflict can be helpful. I'm going to just read one quote of someone named Brenda Euland. I want to write about the great and powerful thing that listening is, and how we forget it, and how we don't listen to our children or those we love, and least of all, which is so important too, to those we don't love. But we should, because listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. This is the reason. When we're listened to, it creates us. It makes us unfold and expand. Ideas actually begin to grow within us and come to life. Who are the people, for example, to whom you go for advice? Not to the hard, practical ones who tell you exactly what to do, but to the listeners. That is the kindest, least sensuous, least bossy people you know. It's because by pouring out your problems to them, then you know what to do about it yourself. So try listening. Listen to your spouse, your children, your friends, to those who love you and those who don't, to those who bore you, to your enemies. It will work a small miracle and perhaps a great one. And the book of Proverbs, I was reading through the whole book of Proverbs recently, thinking what applies to this conflict stuff. And it's all over Proverbs, as you can imagine. But I'll just read 3 Proverbs. And I have these sources if you want to know what they are. He who answers before listening, that is his folly and shame. A fool finds no pleasure in understanding, but delights in airing his own opinions. He who listens to a life-giving rebuke will be at home among the wise. And this is not Proverbs, this is Jimi Hendrix. He says, knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens. I think that's a good one. And recently, maybe you saw this if you're a friend of Melissa Younce on Facebook. She shared with us a little interaction between her and her son Dax. So Dax says, "Mama, I'm calling to you." And she says, "Sorry, Dax, I didn't hear you." And he says, "Put on your listening ears, Mama." So the words we say to our kids come back to us, as you know. Yeah, there's, again, in this handout I'm going to give you later, I don't want to take time to do it now, but there's some different kinds of questions that can help open up conversations instead of shut them down. And if you're interested in this and you want to go deeper in this, that's something that can be helpful. Probably everybody in this room has heard of active listening, right? Does that ring a bell? And there's so much involved in listening with not just your ears, but your eyes, your emotions, your body, entering into that kind of listening with your kids, with your friends, with your spouse, anyone can be really helpful in opening up and especially dealing in conflict. And I'll give you handouts you can look at later that give you some ideas for what is active listening. What does that feel like? What does it look like? What are some ways I could try that? What are some words that might, indicate that sort of thing? Another that I learned about in my work on conflict has been called committed listening, which is even greater than active listening. It's a kind of listening where you're listening with such an openness of heart that it's as if the person's words are your own words. It's hard to describe this, but that thinking we usually, when we're listening and it matters, we're listening oftentimes for facts, like the directions to, this place when I'm in a different city or something like that. But committed listening, it's listening at that level, but it's listening deeper than that level and being so engaged in the process that it really shows, and the other person begins to feel the difference. They feel your participation with them. And when there's that feeling of safety, it begins to break down some of the barriers, the defenses and other things that happen when we're in the middle of this. Okay, I'm going to go through these next ones pretty quickly so we have time to sort of engage. But one author, and the book is back in the back on the table, but has gotten into describing something that's been helpful to me, and that is really realizing that a lot of times when we're in a conflict situation, emotions, they flare up, ours and the other person's. It's not just the other person, it's mine too. Sometimes we can feel it in our bodies. For me, what happens when I'm feeling under stress and tense, my mouth gets really dry. I feel it in my mouth. My daughter was telling me the other day, when she's running late for something and she's under stress, she starts getting hot, like physically hot, So being aware of what's going on in our own bodies and minds and emotions especially when we're dealing in a situation where there's some conflict. But these authors have talked about some things that actually help break open some things in conversations. And that's that if we realize they've identified these as 5 core concerns, concerns that people have, that we all have. The first one is a need for appreciation, for somebody to notice and appreciate what we've done. And sometimes, an experiment, you might try this in a situation where you feel maybe some pushback or tension. If you can find something that you're honestly able to appreciate about the other person and say that, not just feel it inside, but express it, the person can relax. Oh, I don't have to assert myself and try to convince the person that, that I did this right. But, it's like It's like when my husband notices that I wash the floor, for example. It's like, oh, okay, I don't have to figure out how to tell him and let him know, this is what I did for you today and all that. So, and sometimes if you think of the opposite of appreciation, what emotions get triggered when a person or you are feeling unappreciated? It's just, there's a lot going on with this. Affiliation is a concern that's like looking for ways to connect with people, and that can sometimes, especially when you're maybe in a group, you're here, maybe you have a child that's 4 months old and someone else does too, and there's ways that you can connect because of that sort of work toward relaxing and helping you understand each other. And if you feel disconnected, that can result in some emotions that you just go, whoa, I don't know what's going on here, but I don't feel good. Third one is autonomy, which is respect for freedom to make decisions. And sometimes as we deal with our kids, a challenge sometimes is to say, what are things I can let my child decide for him or herself? Like what clothes to wear today? Are there things that will help this child get a sense of autonomy? There's decisions that I can make. And it's very true also in other relationships. I don't think I'll talk about status and role, but those are two of the other things too that make a difference. Just quickly, I'm going to talk about truth and perception. So it's kind of obvious, but sometimes we don't think about this, that we all have different perceptions of what's going on, and sometimes when we're describing a situation, we might think of it as, I might think of it as something true, and someone else might have their own truth that might be different from mine. So realizing that sometimes it's important to see that we have different perceptions about things, and not sort of holding on to my position, but realizing that, yeah, I have a perspective on this, and so do you. And it can change the way we deal with things in conflict. I have on blame versus joint contribution. I was talking to Gail Clay about this before she went to Arizona. And we were talking about, she said, sometimes like when two of my grandchildren are in a room, and there'd just been a flare-up, a fight. And I come in, and she said, what I tend to do is to talk to each of them separately and just, and ask the questions, tell me what you did. And you have a choice about how you're going to react. What would you like to say to your sister, whatever? Is there something you'd like to do now? And what could you have done differently? Which opens up the opportunity for apology and modeling that. But this whole thing of, we have such a tendency to blame. And this is, we see this in the Garden of Eden. Huge blame, Eve made me eat it. Eve said, Satan made me, or the serpent made me do this. And, that's our natural tendency. But getting away from blame and looking at what's my part in this, and the other person saying, what's my part? I read something, Townsend and Cloud have written books on boundaries, various books on boundaries. My daughter's reading one right now about boundaries in dating, which is, some good stuff. But one of the things that they say, and they probably say this in various books they've written, but blame is experienced as truth without love, and that always feels like judgment and condemnation. I'll read that again, because blame is experienced as truth without love, and that feels like judgment and condemnation. So trying to get away from jumping first to blame and looking at what's my part, and helping our children do that too. Another thing that's had taught me a lot about dealing with conflict is doing something that we don't often think about, and that is separating impact from intentions. okay? This little chart, just sort of, on the left, it's my action and the action of the other. And then this column here, the middle one, is with the things that I do, I am aware of my intentions. And I'm aware of, but I'm unaware of the impact of my action on another person, oftentimes. Not to say, we always are, but the first sort of thing that we deal with when we deal with people, and we often are asking ourselves, I wonder if they intended to hurt me. I bet they did. And then you go off on that intended to hurt me path, and you're trying to hurt them back, But if we can realize that when we're dealing with people, especially in conflict, this is the time to ask questions, to get curious, to say things like, when you did what you did, this is how I felt. This was the impact on me. Share that impact. Sometimes that will, and the other person might say, well, I never intended for that to hurt you or do what it did, and, may give an opening for apology. But that just thinking about in your own head, can I separate out the intentions of the person and the impact of that behavior on me? And the same thing, can I separate out my intentions from the impact of my behavior on somebody else? Okay. This stuff is kind of dense, I'm sorry, but if there's anything to come away with, you might think back to something. Just another secret ingredient, know yourself and your tendencies. That was kind of why we did the orange thing at the beginning, What do I sort of typically go to? What's my comfort style when I deal with things? Sometimes, do I stay out of things so much because I'm trying to avoid them, or do I over-activate my role and come into situations where maybe it would be more effective if I let them play out, let them learn from what's going on. Another big one, I think, is do I have a tendency to use the wrong mode of communication? Like if there's something that feels scary, would I rather leave a voicemail message than talk to the person? Or would I rather send an email than, or would this short text be better than, oh yeah, I mean I do it too. It's not that I don't do it, but I'm becoming more and more aware of that. So, and another thing that I've learned about my own self and my tendencies, I tend to interpret disagreement as criticism, especially with my husband. So, if we disagree on something, I take it on as he's criticizing me, and then I go into defensive, and then, we kind of get to impasse pretty quickly. So, but just awareness of ourselves. A couple more. Practice and model vulnerability. If you haven't seen Brené Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability, I'd recommend it. I also have one of her books on the back table that she's written about vulnerability and how it can affect all of our relationships and our parenting. So it's just a good source. And then use resources. I'm going to give you, we'll hand them out after we finished here, but a list of books and things. You might not be a book person, so there's some other resources on there, some ideas on communication. And then the last one is be courageous and prepare for peace. Just like to share a quote from, again, Ken Cloak, who I learned a lot about. He's a mediator and an author and speaker. And he wrote, "You can either tighten up, pull back, and prepare for battle, or you can relax, move toward your opponent, and prepare for peace. Instead of preparing for war, isn't it better to prepare for peace?" So that's all I have. I have a few questions for you. If you have desire to talk about this a little bit more or take these home with you and think about them a little bit more. But I don't know. We have maybe a couple minutes for questions if anybody has any. If you don't, we can just talk at our tables. Yeah.
What do you think is the best way to analyze my tendencies? Would you say it's the 60 or the 30 questions thing? Is that
To me, that is very helpful. I was reading a little bit more about the research that they did on that, and why that tool is so effective is that, you know, many other approaches in research before that would give people choices, but one was, you know, obviously horrible, and one was obviously better. So everybody would tend to go for even though this isn't the way I really am, you know. And so that Thomas Kilmann instrument actually is very revealing, and I did it, and it actually, I'll just show you, it actually, you know, you score yourself, and then there's this chart, and it'll show you based on the way you answered those things. For me, I was highest in accommodating, next highest in compromising, next highest in avoiding, and then collaborating, and my very bottom one was competing. It's way down here. So it just takes something that is sort of hard to figure out and helps you look at that. So I think that the downside of that is it costs $45, but so that's why it's copyrighted, so I was respecting that and didn't copy it. It's online? Yeah, you can look at it online too. Are the questions online too?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the tool is online, and you can go in there and order it. I don't think they put the questions on there, but I might be wrong.
I don't know. It's discover your personality, and it comes up. So maybe there's a way of doing it remote, like digitally.
Right. Yeah, that very well could be. I bet it is. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, well, you know. Yeah, you're welcome.